I am Judge Cyndi Wheelis, and it is my distinct honor to serve as our host this morning. I serve as the presiding judge of the 417th District Court in Collin County. We hear juvenile and child welfare cases, family cases, a little bit of civil cases, DA protective orders. I have also led some work for the Children's Commission in eliminating disproportionality and disparities in our courts and in the child welfare system. I have been a commissioner on the very, very honorable Judicial Commission on Mental Health since its inception, and it has been inspiring to see this commission and its work grow. I was also recently appointed to the Texas Juvenile Justice Department Governing Board by Governor Abbott, for which I am very grateful to at least have an opportunity to help see that wonderful organization grow, and they have really, really done a great job. They've hit the ground running, and we are looking forward to hearing from Dr. Palacios and Ashley in our final portion this morning. When we think about the juvenile justice system, we usually think about dedicated juvenile courts and hear cases involving delinquent conduct. We also think about juvenile probation departments and the diversions, services, and supports they can offer. In reality, though, the vast majority of children and youth who become justice involved do so through justice and municipal courts that handle Class C misdemeanor offenses. These courts are the canaries in the coal mine. These courts often have just a fraction of the resources that are available through a juvenile probation department, or sometimes no resources at all. It is my pleasure, it is my distinct pleasure to announce our next speaker, Judge Cyndi Porter Gore, who will give us tips in implementing programs with minimal or no budget. She has an innovative program that preceded the mental health juvenile court in our county, and she is a leading expert on all things juvenile delinquency. Our first session is titled "The Kids Are Not All Right." Judge Cyndi Porter Gore was appointed as the presiding judge for the Allen Municipal Court in January 2017 after serving as the court's alternate judge for over 7 years. She facilitates a specialized juvenile municipal court docket addressing mental health and substance use issues. Remember, we are saving time by only giving you a brief introduction of our speakers, so please check out her full biography and accomplishments and accolades, because they are many, on the Summit website. I welcome Judge Cyndi Gore, my friend, to the podium.
Good morning. Let me turn this up. I'm a little bit taller than Judge Wheelis. I'm Cyndi Porter Gore, and what I would like to do, is this our clicker?
I think so, yes.
Okay. First, I want to give you guys my background, because I think it's only fair that you understand where I'm coming from. Now, I have to tell you, I'm a little scared to be talking to this room, because I am not an expert in psychology or mental health or anything like that. And I know some of you out there are, all right? So if I get it wrong, please come see me in the speaker box so that I can fix this. This presentation, to my JPs, you may have already heard this. I spent the last year at the Texas Justice Courts Training Center circuit teaching this to the JPs. And basically where I'm coming from is, yes, I'm a judge, but I've been practicing law for 29 years. And I've done all criminal. I got out of law school, went to work at the Lubbock County District Attorney's Office, prosecuted there for about 13 months, and then relocated to Collin County, where I worked at the Collin County District Attorney's Office for another 4.5 years, with my final assignment in the juvenile division. Now, I'm a firm believer that God puts us in places that he wants us when we don't even know what's going on. Because my last assignment, literally the day I was assigned, I was on the phone trying to call my husband to tell him I was done and I was giving notice today. And it came up that I was being assigned to that division. And our original plan was that I wasn't going to quit till the end of the year. And I thought, this is good. I'll learn a new area of law. That'll let me get on another appointment list when I go into private practice. All's good. Now, understand, I never took juvenile law in law school. I wasn't going to play with kids. My plan was to be a career prosecutor, move to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and prosecute drugs and guns and death and all this other stuff. I wanted the big bad guys to play with. So I get that assignment, I go into private practice, and start out predominantly doing adult criminal defense, and became board certified in criminal law at that time. Because I'd been assigned to district courts as a felony prosecutor, most of the district judges would appoint me on those high-level felony cases. So I had lots of ag sex, lots of ag robberies, murders, things like that. But I also was being appointed on some juvenile stuff. And slowly, as my career evolved, I found that my passion really was with the kids. Because if you can get in early and get them back on the right track, sometimes the butterfly effect is amazing. And so with kids, I knew there was a chance I might be able to make a difference and get them on the right track. So ultimately, I became board certified in juvenile law also. Now, what you're going to hear is experience of dealing with both adults and juveniles in the criminal justice system. And I'll tell you, the bulk of my career, up until really the last 5 to 8 years, the way that Texas dealt with those that were mentally ill was we built new prison beds. I dealt with lots of clients, both juveniles and kids, that had mental health and substance abuse, often codependent. They're self-medicating with illegal drugs to deal with the undiagnosed and untreated mental health. But I have to say, the creation of JCMH, I think, has been the major turning point in this. And I'm honored to say I've been at all 6 of these conferences. And every time I'm amazed the things I learned. Yesterday and Wednesday, I'm just like, wow, I didn't know that. Wow, I didn't know that. That's something I'm gonna take back and try to remember. Now you have to understand, at 56, the brain is getting a little full and a little foggy. So hopefully I can keep the important stuff. Now I want you to also understand my husband is in law enforcement, has been for 33 years. He actually, where he's at now, is a captain over an entire shift where they are Department of Public Safety, they're police, fire, and paramedics. So he holds all 3 certifications. So you can imagine some of the shop talk that goes on in our household. And finally, I have 2 daughters that are in their early to mid-20s. One has dealt with depression and anxiety since about age 16. The other one was diagnosed dyslexic whenever she was 6 and ADHD at age 7. She has also had her own anxiety that she's dealt with. So I'm also living it as a parent to see this. All right, people first language. Has anybody heard of this term? Okay, I see some hands. The reason why I want to talk about this is this kind of lays the groundwork to get people, when they come in before you, to open up, and so that you can identify those that have needs that you might be able to meet. This is a way that we talk to them in a way that we're focusing on the person, not on the disability or the mental illness. We don't use labels. We strictly, I often will ask people when they're in front of me, once I realize there might be an issue, I'll say, so do you have any diagnoses? And if they do, they know what that means, and they'll share with me. Yes, I've been diagnosed with bipolar. Yes, I have severe depression and anxiety. And that gives me some insight into what I might be dealing with. If they say, no, I've never been diagnosed, but yet they're exhibiting a lot of things, that tells me, hey, I need to get you assessed so that maybe there is something that we can start treating. So think about the language you're using whenever you're addressing people. That way it opens that door to where they feel more comfortable sharing with you. So you don't ever say, oh, I understand that you're mentally ill. Instead, you're going to use something to the effect of, I understand that right now you're experiencing depression. I understand that you might be receiving treatment for anxiety. We always want to, and this is a hard one for me because any of the criminal defense lawyers in the room, because I did criminal defense work for 17 years, every time I'd tell my client they were going for a drug test, I'd be like, now don't pop pot. You know, I need you to be clean. We don't need a dirty UA. We don't want to do that. We want to talk about positive and negative. Because think about it. My daughter who has ADHD that has been taking Adderall since 3rd grade, she's always going to test positive for amphetamines, or she should. I fully expect she will. She understands what that does for her. But she should be negative for any of the street amphetamines or street drugs, and vice versa. All right, so how do we recognize these people? And this is the hardest thing I have. I'm in a jurisdiction, Allen, Texas is a city of about 100,000. We are sandwiched between Plano and McKinney, Texas, both of which I believe McKinney is about 170 to 200,000. Plano, I think, is around 300,000. I'm in the northern suburbs of Dallas, so we're in the Metroplex area. So I have people, and I have Highway 75 going right through the center of my city, and 121 going along the northern edge of my city. So I get people from Dallas that are appearing in front of me. I get people from Oklahoma that are coming down to go to Dallas. They get tickets or whatever. So the hardest part I have is identifying those who really might be able to utilize this type docket. Now understand, as I talk about this docket, I have an adult docket that I also run exactly the same way. I have a juvenile specialized docket and I have an adult specialized docket. And so the hard part is trying to identify those who might really could benefit from this docket. So I have to watch for their appearance. And I've talked to my staff, my window clerks, when people come up to say, hey, I want to pay my ticket or I want to contest it and I need a court date. I've told them, look, you know, if they mention things that indicate that they have substance abuse or mental health issues, or if they seem erratic, I want you to check. We have a little tab in our software that says treatment docket. And I said, I want you to check that so that when they show up at court, the prosecutor knows to talk a little bit more about that. Maybe my juvenile case manager knows to go into that when she does her interview, or I know to kind of try to investigate that a little further. Same thing whenever people call in. All of my clerks are answering the phones. Tell them the same thing. Hey, when you pull up that case and you're giving them information, how many times do we have a parent call in? And this might be for an adult child too. My child is in rehab. My child is in the hospital. They can't be there this week because they're in treatment. It's a 30-day program or whatever. And so I tell my staff, tell them to file a motion for continuance, because that's the same thing that we do with everyone, but to put in that where they're at, what type of treatment they're seeking, and then I'll reset it outside that 30-day period. But now we know this is someone who's going to need some support one way or another going forward, and they would be ideal. Sometimes they don't exhibit that until they get to the courtroom. I mean, I had a guy one time that stood up and he's pacing at the back of the courtroom. Now understand, my bailiff is retired Marine and now about to retire after a 17-year law enforcement career. He's a little crusty, okay? And I look over at Mulkey, because that's what I call him, Officer Mulkey. And he's like, and I'm like, come here. And he comes over and I said, go back and ask him if everything's okay. If he needs to step out into the lobby, he can go out into the lobby. We'll keep his place and we'll bring him back in. If all he needs to do is just pace, he's free to pace at the back of the courtroom. But Judge, and I was like, no, just go find out what his problem is. Well, the guy had anxiety and he was trying to cope with the anxiety. And so he just wanted to pace. And I'm like, that's fine. If you did your job, he doesn't have any weapons. I think we're safe. It's okay, you know. And so I had to talk to him later and I said, look, we're going to have people that come in that are going to do things. We might see a kid sitting there doing this, okay? Because they've done EMDR and they're dealing with some trauma and their therapist has told them whenever they start having anxiety and flashbacks, do the butterfly pats. I was like, it's okay. They're coping and that's good. That's what we want them to do. And then we have those unusual outbursts. Okay, sometimes as judges, we just ask for it. I had a young man appear in front of me. He was about 11, so that was odd. And so we're looking into, number one, have to determine whether or not we can proceed. It was a criminal mischief. He'd torn something up. I don't remember what it was or where. And his parents had said that he had been down at a placement down by Austin for about 2 months. It was a mental health type placement. And he'd come back and he's appearing in front of me. And we go through and ultimately he gets a deferred disposition. We talk all about it. He's doing fine. They walk out of the courtroom and my court shares a building with Parks and Rec. And Parks and Rec has all these beautiful kind of flag things out in the lobby. And evidently he proceeds to tear one of them up as he leaves the court. And so my bailiff brings him back in and, the parents are like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, okay, well, come up here. And I'm like, Edward, what's wrong? What's going on? Did somebody not treat you well in my court? No. And I'm like, so what, what's going on that you felt you had to destroy the other people's property? I said, you're not in here with me on that right now because you're on probation and that's between your parents and you and the Parks and Rec on whether there's any charges filed on that. I don't care. I just want to make sure that the reason why you were upset when you left here wasn't because somebody, either me or someone in my court, didn't treat you well. And he's standing there and he just has his fist down by his side and he's just looking down. And I'm like, now use your words. Tell me what you're thinking. He looks up at me and he goes, I think you're an asshole. And that was I'm like, don't laugh. God, give me patience. I was like, okay, hey, I ask. And honestly, I have been at times. It's true. I'll own it. His dad snatches him, drags him out of the courtroom. I'm trying to keep a straight face because I'm like, I've had 50-year-old men who were thinking that and couldn't say it to my face, but an 11-year-old sure did. And I thought, honey, you asked for it. And so his mom comes up and I'm like, look, here's what we're going to do because I don't want him to think that he can ever talk to a judge that way, even though we ask for it. I'm going to reset this about a month and I would like for him to write me a letter of apology. He's not going to have to use his words. Obviously, putting him on the spot is a trigger for him. I do not want to do that, but he's got to go home, do that, and then he has to bring that back to me just so that he understands what he just did is unacceptable in any future court should he ever appear in front of a judge. So sure enough, a month later, he comes back and he's made a card for me that he's illustrated and drawn. And on the inside, he's written something to the effect of, Judge Gore, I'm so sorry for calling you a bad name. "You seem like a nice lady." And he signed it. And it sits on a bookcase just to the left of my bench that I can look at every day to think, okay, now careful what you ask for, honey. All right. But obviously that was a deal. Now, the good news on Edward was they adjusted his meds, and by the end of his probation, he was doing the best he'd ever done in school, was having no behavioral interruptions and things like that. So good deal. Now, he was not on my specialized docket. All right, so specialized dockets. Why do we call it a specialized docket? I want to go through the court process and then the costs finally. All right, my juvenile docket began in February of 2018. I took the bench January of 17. I started my adult docket in September of 17, and then February 18 is when we started our juvenile docket. Let me talk about Brandy C. Brandy was a young lady that was about 16 when she came through my court. She came through my court on a theft and a possession of drug paraphernalia ticket. She elected to go on to this docket. She successfully completed it. Now, the background on Brandy was her mom left when she was, I think, about 8 or 10. Mom, I don't know the whole story behind it, but mom just up and left, and it was her, and she had, I think, one older sibling and her dad. Now, her dad was a functioning alcoholic. He went to work, he kept the roof over their head, but as soon as he got home, he drank till he passed out every night. So Brandy was pretty much raising herself. Brandy attended the docket, got into some basically drug treatment classes, and we got her into a little bit of individual counseling. And Brandy has since, we were able to expunge both of those offenses since they were under the penal code. And she enlisted, and she is now in the military doing quite well. She sends me an email about every year and a half. And she's the success story, but I hate to tell you, not everyone's a success story. I have Derek P. Derek P. has been through my program 3 different times. The first time he went through, he was about 13. Derek was not going to school. I don't even remember exactly what. I imagine it was a paraphernalia charge that he come in on. Derek was driving the bus, as I call it. When I used to do juvenile defense, I would often ask the parents when they call me, like, you know, Johnny's just not doing this and Johnny's not following this rule. I'm like, who's driving the bus here? And they're like, what? And I'm like, why are you letting a 14-year-old drive the bus? It's your bus. You need to be driving it. Well, Derek was clearly driving it. He had 2 parents that were the poster children for enabling. And I told them that. Because during the period that he was on the docket the first time, he took his dad's Mustang, it was a vintage Mustang, went for a little ride, that's unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, took dad's credit cards, ordered all kinds of stuff off the internet without his permission, credit card abuse. Parents always called the police every time this happened, but then they would, when the investigator would follow up to file the case, we don't want to press charges. He's just going through a phase. And I sat and told them in my courtroom, you need to press those charges. This is the time for us to fix him. Because if they did, he would have landed in front of this lady who I practiced in front of for many years, who had all kinds of resources that I did not have. But they wouldn't do it. He was unsuccessfully discharged on the first case because I think he picked up further charges. Then we rock along for a couple of years. He picks up a couple of more charges. We put him back on the docket again. This time I hold him in contempt and I transfer the case. He picks up another case, another Class C. I transfer all of them up to Judge Wheelis, where he's under supervision up there. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm done with Derek P. No, Derek picks up some charges 6 days before his 17th birthday. Those get filed, and I tell my juvenile case manager, we're transferring those because we transferred the others. It needs to go up to the 417th. And then he picked up some more charges about a month after he turned 17, which I can't transfer because now he's an adult and he's in my court. Well, during this time period, my juvenile case manager resigned, and we went a period without it. Well, those charges when he was 16, we found out a year later never got transferred. So he comes in on the 17 charges. He's now went to a rehab. He's 17 years old, and I want to go back on your specialized docket, Judge Gore. And I said, okay, Derek, you know me. I don't play. You know what I'm going to expect from you. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And he actually was looking good. He pleads in like June. We put him on the docket. By August, he's now picked up aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and in the county jail. And so he was unsuccessfully discharged from the docket. I'm not sure. I think those the 180-day deferreds will end probably around any time here in the near future, and he'll be set for a show cause. But then the juvenile cases, okay, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. He violated, we kicked him off. Then the juvenile cases come up. We have to bring him back in. They're now a year old and say, hey, we dropped the ball, but we've got to take care of this. I want to do your docket again, Judge Gore. Goes to another rehab, comes back out, and this is when he picked up the aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So 3 times I tried, and here's my philosophy. I'm willing to try 100 times because maybe the 100th time might be the time it sticks. What else do we have to lose? I can have him plead, order him to pay fees, do community service, but if we don't fix the underlying problem, he's just going to be back. So you don't have a once and you're done with this docket with me. I've had many people that have occasionally come through repeatedly, especially the ones who either declined or were unsuccessfully discharged. Now, I will brag that my statistics with my juveniles is 75% have not picked up any subsequent charges. Now, we don't run their criminal history. I don't know if they've picked other things up, but most of them are still living in my jurisdiction. Most of these kids are Allen kids, and they'd be picking up charges if they weren't. My adult docket, we have about a 70% success rate on not seeing recidivism. All right, I kind of went over this a little bit ago, how we find out staff contacts through phone calls, appearing at the window, emails. My juvenile case manager, she meets with each defendant. Sometimes it's through Zoom, sometimes it's in person, prior to their first court setting. And she does kind of a little predisposition report, asking how they do in school, if they have any health issues, any mental health issues, any learning disabilities, how they get along at home, things like that. So that helps to identify them. Now, thank goodness, I have a prosecutor who really embraces this. And he'll be talking to people during the negotiations and say, you know what? I think you need to go on the specialized docket, and here's what it's about. And so then I'll talk to them, and after I go through all of it, if that's what they want to do, that's what we do. I've had people show up, and this is more on the adult side, but show cause. I've had people that had traffic tickets, no insurance, speeding, whatever. They come in, take care of their ticket, and for whatever reason, they don't pay the fees. They get a new ticket, whatever. So we have to set them for a show cause before a final conviction can be entered if they've received a deferred. And I'm pretty liberal on deferreds. And so I've had people show up in front of me, and I'm talking to them, and you can tell they're in a manic phase. And I'm like, so, what's going on here? And I tell them, hey, if you want to go on my treatment docket, I'll show cause your case for the next 6 months so that we can get you into treatment. And if you end up satisfying these fees and do well, it's my discretion. I'll dismiss your case for successful completion of the deferred. So my adult cases, They're not necessarily a deferred. They could be going on show cause. I had a young man once that was in compliance, so conviction had been entered, and now it was just fines. And we're just trying to get him to pay the fees. He's living with his grandmother, has a severe seizure disorder and substance abuse, and we put him on that docket for 6 months, and he ends up satisfying all those fees to close the case. So the reason why we call it a specialized docket is we try to do everything. I'm not that good, but I don't have any choice. So my adults, I've had veterans that we treat it kind of like a veterans court. We get them into treatment with the VA and they report to me and kind of tell me what's going on. Mental health issues, substance abuse. So I have you could say I have my mental health court, I have my substance abuse court, I have my veterans court, I have my family court issues. Whatever your issue is, if we can get you into treatment and help you with that, then you go on this docket. That's why it's called specialized. We called it a treatment docket for a while, and we were afraid that maybe that insinuated that there was something wrong. And I don't want people to think that there's something wrong with them. What I want them to think is I can be better than I am today. And that's what we're trying to help them do. Now, we try to emulate the specialty courts, but we are not a designated specialty court because I do not have a defense attorney who participates in this. My city doesn't pay for that. So the phases are we identify the participants. If they elect to go on the docket, I require that they have to get an assessment. Now, if they've done it through a private company, and you have to understand, I'm in a very affluent area. So a lot of the people that appear in front of me, including the kids, parents have resources. They have a private therapist they're using. They have their own psychiatrist they're using, whatever. That's fine. But I want to know, now if they've been into a 30-day treatment program, I know they've had an assessment. So then what I want is the discharge papers. I want to know what the aftercare that you're ordered with. But if they have not had an assessment, I send them to my local mental health authority. And are my LifePath Systems crew from Collin County here? Okay. I know there's some of them here. I could not do this docket without them. I have partnered with our local mental health authority, which is LifePath Systems in Collin County. They haven't, one of their employees logs in on my docket each month and participates to help facilitate connecting people to get that assessment and then get into services. So I require the assessment. Typically, we put them on a 6-month deferred because municipal courts only have 180-day jurisdiction for a case, okay? That's the longest I can put them on probation. So we put them on for 180 days. Whatever the window fine is, I give them 180 days to satisfy that. And then I give them $12.50 an hour credit for any services that they participate in, okay? So if they do it through LifePath Systems, each month I have a spreadsheet that I send them. In fact, I sent my juvenile one Tuesday morning right before I left because our next juvenile docket is next Wednesday, and I knew I'd be out of the office through the end of the week. So that that representative can go through LifePath and she puts down everything they've done the preceding month and how many minutes that involved. And then I give them credit for that. So if they use LifePath, they don't have to keep up with a sheet or get documentation to bring to me. If they do private work, then what I tell them is if you're seeing a therapist, I need a letter on the therapist's letterhead that says, I saw Jane Doe the following dates for 1-hour session, 30-minute session, whatever it is. I don't need to know what you're talking about. That's none of my business. I just need to know that you've attended and participated. You bring that to us. I look at that. I deem it as community service, and we apply it towards the fees. So the goal is by the end of that 6 months, this person has paid not a dime to my city for the violation, but they've engaged in services that have improved themselves. So I'm incentivizing them to do that. Now, with juveniles, I have to grant them community service in lieu of paying the fees because kids technically are indigent. So they would be doing just regular community service instead, but I can count any type of treatment as that community service. I even give an hour community service for each time they go and refill their prescription meds because we want them medication compliant. I don't care if they go in and see a nurse practitioner and they're 15 minutes, walk downstairs because they dispense it there at the location where they're at or whatever and leave. They're going to get an hour credit just for going to get their medication refilled. So then after that, upon completion, the case is dismissed just like a regular deferred. And then juveniles, if it's a penal code offense, if it's a alcohol and beverage code, alcohol type offense, or tobacco offense, we can expunge them at different ages at certain times. So they're eligible to do that. All right. Once they're put on deferred, they have to report once a month to me. My adult dockets, we do it on the second Wednesday at 2 p.m. My juvenile dockets, we do it on the fourth Wednesday at 4 p.m. I got to keep it simple so that they remember this. Second, 2, fourth, 4. We used to do all in person. COVID come along. We discovered Zoom. Now we do it Zoom. Now I do have some adults and some juveniles that come to the court because I sit on the bench when we're doing this. And I've told them, if you don't want to Zoom, you want to come in person, you're welcome to. And whenever they come and they're talking to me, I literally turn my camera around so everybody on Zoom can see him or her or whoever speaking to me. But for the most part, we all do it on Zoom. And I tell you, Zoom works really well for this kind of check-in because now I'm playing kind of probation officer because my adults can schedule a later lunch and they'll log in, they'll walk, you'll see they're sitting out in their car. I've had one that goes to the closet at their work, whatever. They log in, check in with me. My juveniles, they can log in, if they're at home, they can log in and mom and dad can log in from work if needed. Several of my juveniles recently have been in placements. So they log in with their case manager or their therapist at their placement and mom or dad's logging in from home and everybody gets to participate. So I found the Zoom is a very positive adjustment to this program because it makes it easier. And if it's easier for them to appear, they're more likely to appear. Again, I require that there be some type of assessment done. We tried this for a while where we didn't do assessments and it just doesn't work because then they don't feel like they have any need to comply because there's nothing wrong with them. There's no reason to get services because I don't need any help. Getting the assessment just helps facilitate that. Again, all the fines and costs are satisfied through $12.50 an hour credit. And then I try to tailor the specific requirements for each kid as they're needed. And I'll kind of get into that here in just a little bit. All right. There is a lot of hand-holding. How many people out here do I have that have practiced in the child protective services realm? Okay. I used to do a lot of that. I used to get appointed on a lot of that because I had the criminal background to represent the parents. And often if there was a child who was also a dual status child, I got appointed on those because I knew the juvenile system and I knew the CPS. I found greatest success in representing the parents when I was their cheerleader. And what do I mean by that? Because you can look at me and tell I probably was not a cheerleader, all right? Trying to do a flip with this much just doesn't work, okay? What I would do is I would kind of break it down and say, you know, CPS has a list this long and they want it all done yesterday. And I'd be like, okay, 2 things. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to set up this assessment. We're going to pick 2 things and we're going to check that off. And we're just going to slowly go down it. And when they would call, and I was like, you call, and if you can't get in, you call me and I'll follow up. And I was just, hey, you're doing good. I'm so proud of you. You set up that appointment and you made it. All right, now what are we going to do next? Well, it's the same thing with this. We have to focus on the positives because there's so many negatives. If we look at it, we'd all give up and just go home. In the first few months, sometimes rewards are really helpful. We used to utilize this a lot when the kids were in person. Now that it's on Zoom, I can't really handle my candy bar or let them pick out a bag of chips or anything like that. So the rewards now are more of the judge's praise. I have everybody be present, and I'll ask them to stay on the whole time because I want them to see the people who are doing what they're supposed to and how I react to them. And then the people who aren't, whenever bad Judge Cyndi has to come out or mean Judge Cyndi, they can see that, yes, she does have a hammer that she's willing to utilize. And I think it's good because it helps them understand. I spend probably about 10 to 15 minutes per person on each of these dockets. Now, you're thinking, man, with 100 people, how are you going to do that? I don't have 100 people on these dockets. Right before the COVID, the largest my adult docket was about 21. I usually average about 6 to 10. I think right now we have 8 on my adult docket. My juvenile docket can run anywhere from 1 to 8. This month, I literally have 2. One of the kids will graduate next week, so I'll be down to 1. It ebbs and flows. It seems like when I have a lot of adults, I don't have that many kids, and when I have a lot of kids, I don't have many adults, which is good so that I can keep on top of all of it. All right. TBRI. How many people in here have been through a TBRI training? If you get the opportunity, I highly recommend you to do this. This is kind of the approach I take with these people. And just like, what was the doctor that spoke on? Well, no, on our first speaker. Dr. Almador, with his LEAP approach, you have to build a connection. By building a connection, you build trust, and it's amazing how you can get them to respond whenever they're connected with you, okay? So I do a lot of connecting, and what I do is while these kids are talking, I'm taking copious notes onto the computer I'm like, so, tell me about your last week. What type of classes are you taking right now? How are you doing? What's your favorite class? Did you have, and they'll be like, well, I had one kid who had a lower IQ. I think he was under an ARD. He was like, Judge, I got an 89 on my history exam. And I was like, that is amazing because history was not my strong point. And so I made notes of that. So the next month, whenever I'm talking to him, I'm like, so how are we doing in history? Had any more 89s? I got a 92 on the last one. And so he's thinking, wow, she knows me. She listened to me. If I hadn't taken that note, I would not remember that, okay? I know my limitations. So I'm typing down what these kids are saying. I'm looking for a job. I've got my application in with McDonald's. I'm hoping I get an interview with them. So the next month when they check in, so how's that job search going? Did you get that interview with McDonald's? No, but I did get one with Walmart or, whatever. And so I do that. And I always, before each docket, I have another spreadsheet, and it's my notes, that I'll put at least 3 questions with each kid that I'm going to ask them. One is going to be whatever goals we set the last month. Did you do X, Y, Z? The second is, hey, how's it going in history? Or how did that job interview go? Or something like that. And I do the same thing with the adults, something that's personal to them. And then I ask them, what was the best thing that happened to you last week? And have them tell me that. Because I want them focusing on good things. And 9 times out of 10, that good thing, I can somehow route it back around to, well, that probably didn't happen when you weren't taking your meds, did it? Or, hey, that's because you did this, or you're actually utilizing those coping skills that you're getting through your therapy or whatever. And I try to connect it back to the things they're engaged in so they can see that causal connection. Then what I do is, before the end of each docket, whether it's good or bad, good report or negative report, I'll say, okay, what are our 2 goals for next month? What are 2 things that we're going to get done before you come back to see me? You tell me what's something you want to do. And usually they'll be like, well, I'm going to work on my family, my relationship with my parents, because some of the kids are in placement and they've got their different goals, and they're like, yeah, we're going to do some family therapy and I'm going to work on connecting better with my parents or whatever. And so they'll do that. I write that down. If they've done something wrong, they've relapsed, whatever. So what are we going to do to get back on track? Do we need to get back into an IOP? Do we need to get back in to see our counselor? You choose. What do you think you need to do to get back where you need to go? Because I'm empowering them. So instead of me telling them you got to do it, now I suggest to them what those options are. So I'm controlling it, but they get to choose it. So now they feel like it's not the judge making me do it. I'm in control. And I tell you, with kids, I don't know about you, but I remember I couldn't wait till I could move out and be my own boss. I was sick of my mama telling me everything to do. So you let them do that. And then if it's a negative, we correct them. And we talk about, okay, so let's look at what happened. How could we have better handled that? How could you have done better? What could you have done to maybe not relapse or whatever? And we talk about that so that they again feel like they can be in control of all of this. All right. You can't have a cookie cutter. Don't put up roadblocks. We have to stay consistent. And that's one thing I always try to do with both these dockets. I consistently praise those for positive things, and I try to stay consistent on if they violated what the sanction or whatever would be. Now understand, I can't throw them in jail. I don't have that option as a municipal court judge. So the sanction might be that I require them to do some actual community service. You've got to do, 4 hours of community service. And we pick a place that we all agree on that they're going to go, and they've got to do that before the next month or something. And you have to also understand, especially when you're dealing with substance abuse, that relapse is part of recovery. I've had at least 5 people, both juvenile and adult, that have went through these dockets that in the middle of the dockets relapsed. I mean, like picked up PIs and were in my jail. And I did the arraignment the next morning. I'm like, hey, John, I was hoping it wouldn't be you, Judge. Well, when you're the only judge, it's going to be me. And I'm like, look, here's what we need to do. I'm going to set, if you want to enter a plea, that's fine. I'll assess a final conviction and give you time to pay. You've got 10 days that if you want, get out and think about it. You want a new trial, we'll set this. If you want to, on this case, go back on my docket, it's always an option. You've just extended how long you got to play with me from 6 months to now, another 6 months or more. But the ones that show up, and I am the biggest cheerleader when they show up at that docket and I know they've relapsed, even if they didn't appear in front of me, because I hear about it. Either the case hits my deal or LifePath is telling me, yeah, John relapsed, whatever. Or half the time they send an email to my clerk saying, let the judge know I relapsed. I've checked myself into inpatient treatment or whatever. But when they show up, I'm like, it is so courageous of you to be here. I could not think of anything harder to do than quitting a substance than to come back in front of a judge to admit that you broke the rules. And you know what? Because you did that, I can work with you on this. And I tell them, if you're honest with me, I can work with you all day long. When you start lying, that's whenever I can't help you, because you're denying yourself and you're denying me and everybody else. So you got to be honest with me. Now, one of the things I've done, I had a young lady last year that was on my treatment docket, completely dysfunctional home. Mom was a problem. Mom had kicked her out when she was 16. She was living with her 21-year-old sister. Now, the background on this young lady was when she was 14, she got pregnant. Had a baby right after she turned 15. Baby died of natural causes within a month of birth. Was not a neglect, wasn't abuse, nothing, but had a baby, baby died. She refused to go to school. And I get it. Kids are cruel. She'd waddled around that school pregnant. Everybody knows she has a baby, and more than likely everybody knows now that baby has died. So you can think of the ugly names that kids call other kids. Probably called her baby killer, things like that. She wasn't going to go to school. I get it. And so I tell her, I'm like, here's the options. We can either try to get you over into the alternative school so you can do some credit recovery, because now she's probably at least a year behind in school. Or she was working full-time, living with her sister, working full-time at Sonic. I said, if you want to get into a GED program, I'll support you with the GED program. And the great thing about that is when you get done, we can then enroll you in Collin College, our local junior college, and you can start taking classes there. Because she's now 17. She's not going to stay in school till she's 19 or 20. I mean, that's a reality. It's not going to happen. And her mom's like, I want her to go to school. And I'm like, then why is it she's missed for 6 months and you haven't done anything? I'm like, no, this is the options. She either gets her GED or she does that. Well, then mom would not go sign for her to take the GED. So I had to repeatedly bring mom in and tell her, you have two options. You either show up and sign so that she can take this GED, or I have a cell with your name on it. Now, I've never held anyone in contempt. It's too much work. It really is. As a judge, too much work. But, we finally, and she still didn't do it, but the girl finally was able to get them, let her take the GED test, passed it the first time she took it. Amazing. She got that. We tried to get her into some therapy for the trauma that she had dealt with the loss of the baby, grief therapy, things like that. It seemed like we could never get that connected up, but she successfully completed the program, was enrolled to take a class this last fall at Collin College, and was working full-time at Chick-fil-A. And so I consider that a win. She left my court in a better place than when she came into it. We want to also get them kids, we need to get them engaged in positive social activities, okay? Because whenever they feel like they're part of a team or a group, that's that inclusion that sometimes they're not getting maybe at home, in the home deal. So a lot of the kids, I'll be like, so, what club are you in at school? Or what are you doing? Oh, I don't do anything. Okay, well, you know what? Next month you need to come back. You're joining a club. Allen High School is gigantic. There's a million clubs out there. You pick which one you want. I don't care if it's chess. I don't care if it's there's probably one that has to do with sea turtles, and there's no sea turtles in Allen, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I'm like, you look at it, you find a club, you're going to join that, and you need to come back and let me know when the meetings are and how that's going. So we want them to get involved in that. And then I try to find ways. I'm like, so what's your interests? What's your hobbies? And get them active in that. And often it will also have a trickle-down effect with their treatment and everything. All right, so they have to appear monthly. Now, I have to be realistic with this. If there's a major doctor's appointment that they've been waiting to see, as long as they let me know ahead of time, I tell them I need an email check-in. You need to email me how you're doing, what you've been doing this last month, and if you're having any problems right now, any issues. And those any issues could be, I'm now homeless. My parents lost their house. or I can't get transportation to go because my mom's car broke down, or whatever. I mean, I want to know about those things. Of course, again, I do require the recent assessment, and that they follow that. And then the medication management is a big one, and I try to incentivize that as much as I can if it's applicable. All right, schools. We often forget that schools often are a big resource. And so I'll ask the parents, so is Johnny under a 504? Or is he under an ARD or things like that? And they'll be like, no. And I'm like, well, do you have any concerns about how's he doing in school? Well, he struggles. He's, And I was like, maybe you need to request that he have an assessment done. Maybe he has a learning disability that if he had some accommodations, school would not be the struggle that it was. I know this from my own daughter with her dyslexia. She was testing gifted and talented in kindergarten, but in first grade, she was at risk for reading and math because she was severely dyslexic. And until we got her into a dyslexia program where she learned that she could decipher things in a way that I don't, because I don't see it that way, school then became something that she enjoyed. Then we had to jump over the ADHD hurdle, which we didn't realize was even higher than the dyslexia hurdle. But those can be excellent resources. And so I'll tell the parents, you need to go ask, tell them that you want to have an assessment. They have to do that within 60 days and this, that, and the other. Or if they're on one, maybe we need to have him reassessed. Maybe we need to have a meeting and see if we can get that changed, some different accommodations. All right, expenses. I have zero budget. My city gives me zero budget for this. In fact, I'm not even sure that a lot of the city council even know that I do these 2 dockets. Because my deal is I'm just doing it and let the results speak for themselves. But I give up about 2 hours a month to each docket of my personal time. So they're meeting once a month. Most dockets run about an hour. Sometimes, we had, month before last, my juveniles, I had 4 on there, and it was a train wreck. And we were there till 5:30 because each kid, I was having to spend about half an hour with them. I had some that weren't in a placement that had some severe concerns that they were highly depressed and was trying to explain to the parents what they needed to do, talking to the kid, things like that. I usually spend about half an hour each month before each docket sending that spreadsheet to LifePath and then creating my own with my notes and stuff, because I know we're all busy. I literally will walk out of one thing and then have to go straight into this docket. So I've got to have those notes so I can make that hard right from wearing this hat as a judge to another. I have a docket clerk who participates with me, and I have a juvenile case manager on my juvenile dockets. All correspondence is sent directly to my docket clerk. It doesn't come through our regular court email, so that if we're getting some of those medical records, that they're submitting things like that, we can create a little bit more privacy with that information. And then I have a representative from LifePath Systems that logs in. I also have our police department has trying to think of her exact title. She's CIT, but she's a coordinator. She's not law enforcement. And Summer is amazing. She really is good about finding resources. And when I ask that deal about, do you have transportation? Is that an issue? Or are you homeless? She'll pop up and go, oh, they need to call so-and-so down in Plano. They're a good resource for finding housing. Or call so-and-so because they can arrange for free transportation. Now, if they're a client of LifePath Systems, in their budget, they have transportation that can arrange to get them to their meetings, to their therapies, whatever. But I have them, and then I have a representative from a local nonprofit, Grace to Change, which is an amazing organization dealing with substance abuse treatment for both adults and juveniles. Shannon White logs in with me. And then one of my local therapists used to be with the juvenile probation department, and now she's got her own private company going. She logs in. And so I've got some community resources that when things come up, they'll go, hey, Judge, there's this one that we could connect them with. And so we're trying to connect them with the resources so that if it's easier to find the resource, they might use the resource, is always the hope. Now, I know some of you that are from rural areas. I grew up in Hugoton, Kansas. Has anybody ever heard of Hugoton, Kansas? There's BFE, and then 30 miles this way is Hugoton, Kansas, okay? It's southwest corner of Kansas, straight north of Amarillo. Amarillo is the closest civilization, I will tell you that. I understand what it's like, but if you're doing this through Zoom, even if your local mental health authority is in a county over, you might be able to get one of them to log in and help with that. And maybe you know the local therapist or something, and they might be willing to jump on. I'm not paying that therapist or anything like that, but the plan is, she can say, well, we have a program. If you want to come, we can do an assessment. Maybe they'll choose her, or she'll say, no, there's another one, or whatever. But everybody's kind of collaborating, and that's how we connect them with their sources. Prosecutor, I used to have my prosecutor participating in these check-ins. We had to move on. The prosecutor wasn't available on Wednesdays, so now they don't. But when they did, again, that was another 2 hours a month. Mine is a contract. I don't have a full-time prosecutor. So that would cost the court 2 hours of their time a month because they're just there for those dockets. And if they're full-time, it doesn't cost anything extra. Or like we handle everything in a regular pretrial with them, and then they come over for the monitoring with me, and you don't have to have the prosecutor if that's the case. Ideally, if you have a defense attorney, most areas, they charge about $100 an hour for court-appointed type stuff. I would love to get one so that I could then qualify as a specialty court, get all those specialty court grants, and grow this even further, and that's something we're looking at. But I do it without a defense attorney right now. All of my defense attorneys that get the whole specialty court are busy on her specialty courts, and they're on Wednesdays too, so they're not available. It's just how things work out. Drug testing, you can get them off of the internet if you buy them in bulk for about $4 to $6 a piece. What I do, I've had 2 individuals that I've required drug tests, and they both have been juveniles. If they show up and I think there's an issue, or if the parents report something in the middle of that month term, I'll say, okay, you've got 24 hours. I need a 5-panel drug test. You can go to any test now. You can go, we have several places around us. It runs about $50 to do a 5-panel test. And you just need to, and I want levels. I tell the parents, I want levels, because it makes a difference. If I test them and they're positive, and next month I test them and they're positive, marijuana can stay in your system a while. I need to know if the levels have went up or down if I test them the next month. But incentives, rewards, it can be really cheap. We used to do a bag of candy bars and some chips. That was for the adults and the kids. Graduation gifts, I have some keychains that I've ordered off of Amazon. They cost $8 a piece. I buy them. It says, always remember, you were given this life because you're strong enough to live it. I felt like that applied when you're dealing with mental health, substance abuse, veterans, whatever. That was something that could apply to everybody. And I tell them, look, when they're graduating, I'm like, I'm so proud of you. You have built this support system, especially the ones that relapse in the middle. All 5 of my relapses graduated successfully, ultimately, because they got back on the horse and kept riding. But I tell them, keep this, because you know what? Life is full of hills and valleys and hard right turns and hard left turns. And what we have today could all be gone tomorrow. And so I wish I could tell you you've gotten through the worst, but I can't say that. But now you know what you need to do when you hit another bump in the road. Also, look at your local businesses. The Kiwanis Club, I spoke to them 2 months ago, and I was telling them about, they just want me to come in and ask me questions. And I was like, so kids, what do you do? And I told them about this. And they're like, the next kid you need, we'll pay for the GED. Just call us. Because my kid paid for it on her own. But wouldn't it have been nice that 150, the Kiwanis Club would have happily done that. And they're like, yeah, if you have something come up, call us. We're all about helping the kids here in Allen. Reach out to these organizations. They like to spend that money and see that it's directly affecting someone. All right. In closing, there's lots of different resources. TJCTC and TMCEC, that's the training for both municipal and JP courts. They always have it. We've talked about the SIM workshops. I highly encourage you to do one of those. I've participated in one several years ago. I think we're hoping to do another one here in the near future. Lots and lots of resources out there. The SIM, it's great because you find out, that's how you find out those people to bring in during your dockets. That's how I got Summer from the PD to come in. And that's how I found Grace to Change, was in a SIM that I did 5 years ago. I reached out and I was like, hey, would you mind sending somebody just to log in now that she used to come in person? And I was like, hey, now that we're doing it virtual, and she's like, oh, that's easy. The head of the organization is the one who logs in now. She was like, yeah, I can do that 2 hours a month. So it helps you realize that, and then it helps you know where those deserts are that you don't have the services, so that you can try to figure out another way to deal with that because there's nothing there. So I recommend that. Find your local mental health authority. This, whatever it is, I don't know, I'm not, the scan code or whatever, that'll take you to the state list. It tells you by county who your local mental health authority is. There's one for every county in the state of Texas. Reach out to them. That's what they're getting funds. You've got the people that need their help. Reach out to them and say, hey, let's connect. I can help you with this. Help me with this. Mental Health Texas has a lot of providers where you can find some of those, maybe independent. OCA, they have some great resources, especially if you're wanting to become a specialty court, or just go steal all the stuff and say, hey, I'm going to do it on my own like I did. Plagiarism is the most sincere form of flattery, people. There's no original thinking going on up here. I'm taking everybody else's ideas and running with them. JCMH, this is an awesome resource. SAMHSA, I highly recommend getting on their email list. They have some great webinars, and a lot of times they're during the lunch hour. And so I'll log in, and even if I can only make half an hour or whatever of it, I'll log in and listen to those to hear the latest information going on with everything from specialty courts to just mental health treatment, new trends, things like that. NAMI is another excellent source. Thank you for what you do, yes. Especially when you have the parents that are just like, I'm done. I don't know what else to do. I'm done. Connect them with NAMI, because NAMI can give them that support of how they can continue not to be done and help that. So what I hope you take from this isn't that I expect you to go back and set up a docket like this. Grab one little thing or another. Maybe just change the way you talk to them in court. Or maybe, you reset a case and say, hey, why don't you go get an assessment and come back and we'll look at that. If we can nudge just one person in the right direction, the butterfly effect is amazing. I used to tell my juvenile clients, these parents would come in and I represented a lot of kids that had serious felony 1 offenses, but a lot of them it had to do with treatment. And I tell them, I'm like, look, there is a dark cloud hanging over you, and I get it. This is the worst you could ever imagine, that your child is facing incarceration. You feel like you failed as a parent. You haven't in most circumstances. But going through the system and the juvenile justice system, if we can get them into the treatment they need, we can change the path. And we can fix this. And there's going to be a silver lining, I promise you. It might not happen for a couple of years, and we may never fully know what we avoided. But by them coming in at 14, 15, we can do so much more with these kids at this age than I can when they're 17, 18, and they're in the adult system. So, you know, we can't ever do enough for everybody, but if we can change one life, and that person then changes someone else's life, and it goes on, think of all the good that we've done. So I hope that you're able to take some of this. I do want to thank Amber Myers with TJCTC. This PowerPoint and everything, I cut it down. It actually was a longer presentation with them, but she did all of the great graphics and all of that on that, and all of their staff. If you have any questions, here's my email. Feel free to email me. I'm always happy to assist. And thank you. I mean, think about everything you're learning here and how you're going to take it back. And I've had resistance in my organization. And I'll be like, hey, we need to do this. And they're like, yeah, whatever. But keep screaming and keep pounding. And we're seeing a major trend in improving the world as it was to be a better place now. And we're taking the stigma out of mental health. And that's a good thing. And we're fixing it at the base level, which means then they're not staying in the system. Now, my husband says, you know, if you fix everybody, we're not going to have a job. And I said, well, you must really think I'm somebody special, because I don't think I'm going to fix everybody. But I'm like, if we fix more, there's always going to be work, people, I'm sorry to tell you. And I said, you know, that's the great thing about law. I just pick a different area. Maybe I'll go do probate whenever there's no more criminal or juvenile law. That would be a good thing. So with that, I want to thank you. You guys have a great conference and safe travels home.